Hi girls. This is a online recording just to let you know how to go about your connections. Now I've put on the OneNote, if you go to Content Library, I have put the connections handout in there for you. Some of you have already got this from English. Now I'm going to open this handout so that you can see the important things in it that we need to note. Now, just to let you know that it is 4 credits and it does not count for university entrance literacy, but it does count for the 17 credits for you to go to University of Auckland. Aside from that, this is what you need to do. Now, the deadline date here is the 2nd of June. However, because you're ESOL, and if you're doing the ESOL theme, this wouldn't include the girls who are doing the English theme, but if you're doing the ESOL theme, we will extend our deadline out a little to give you girls a bit more time. However, I do need to see your final drafts on the 2nd of June. Bearing in mind, though, that things have changed quite a lot as well with school being shut down. Okay, so let's have a look here at what's important. All right, so you're going to choose a connecting aspect, that means part across text. Now, a connecting aspect that you're going to be doing is, and I'll write it down here for you girls, your connecting aspect, if you're doing mothers and daughters, is we're going to be looking at mother-daughter relationships. And we're going to be looking at the characters, and we're going to be looking at the relationship. Okay, so there's 2 aspects we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the character of the mothers, and we're going to be looking at the quality, the kind of relationship. So you can have 2 or 1 connecting aspect, but because we're looking at mother-daughter relationships, we're going to be looking at 2. We'll look at character and relationship. All right, let's go back to where we were. So, part 2, identify at least 2 significant connections between your chosen texts. Well, those are going to be our significant connections, character and relationship. Okay, we're going to part 3 now. Analyze the significant connections. Study the links between the texts. Make reasoned points that interpret the links that you have identified between the texts. Okay, so this is how we're going to be doing this. You're going to be reading your text, and you can have a table, but basically, if we draw a table here, I'll just make it. All right, so let's say, for example, now that the first thing that we're going to be looking at is maybe the controlling nature of the mother. Okay, and here you would be having text 1, text 2, text 3, and text 4. Now remember that you don't need to find connections between all of your texts. You only need to say find connections between some of them. So let's say, for example, text 1, you notice that there's a controlling mother and you're going to be writing about it here. So let's say, I'll just make a little sign there. So let's say you're going to be writing about that controlling nature about the mother. You might only be writing about that for text 1 and text 3. So remember that you don't have to find connections between all of your texts, just some of them. So let's go back now to what I told you about for today's lesson. Let me just have a look here where I had daily classes. I gave you some ideas of questions. So you could look at the controlling mother. So here are our questions. How did they express their control? What was the impact on their daughters and the relationship? So what we could be doing now is we could be talking about the quality of the relationship. So let me go back here. So you might be talking here about the poor relationship between the mother and daughter. And you might choose to write about that one in here, and maybe here you've seen a connection. And here you might be wanting to write about the effect of culture on the relationship, for example. I'm just giving you some ideas. And you might see a connection here between this text as well as this text. Now, each of these ideas are going to become your paragraphs. So I would suggest that you write a text of approximately 3 to 4 main ideas. And these become your paragraphs. Okay, so we could be looking at, you could have 3 or 4 main ideas. Now, what I suggest you do now is get yourself a cup of coffee, pause this for a moment, so that we can just talk in a little bit more depth about how we're going to do this. Okay, girls, so I hope you had a cup of tea or something. And now just to let you help you to understand how we're going to write these connection reports and how you're going to go about doing this. Okay, so you've got a table. So here's your table, and in your table, you write down your 4 texts, right? Now, you don't have to use these texts, but I suggest you do because they've got quite a lot that are similar about them. Now, I'm going to show you how you go about doing this. So let's say, for example, you see a connection between 2 kinds and between Battle Hymn, for example, okay, of the Tiger Mother. So there's a lot of similarities between 2 kinds and Battle Hymn. So what you're going to do is you're going to write about what you find similar. So I have identified, for example, and you could do something different, that something that I find similar between 2 kinds and Battle Hymn is that the mother is really controlling. So then what I do is I make notes for myself and I explain how I see this in the text. For example, the mother forces her will on Jingmei. Jingmei is your daughter, and makes her play the piano even though Jingmei hates it. She does not give up her efforts even when Jingmei refuses and cries. Her mother says, now look, I'm using a quotation. Only 2 kinds of daughters, she shouts in Chinese, those who are obedient and those who follow their own mind. Only 1 kind of daughter can live in this house, obedient daughter. The mother seems almost mad in her desire for Jingmei to play. The narrator describes her mother with her mouth open and smiling crazily as if she was pleased I was crying. Now, this is where I'm writing my notes and my quotations. Now, remember, we've got 2 quotations I've used here. So this one's a quotation there. And I've also put another quotation in here. So I'm collecting my ideas and quotations in this table. Then I'll go to the next text and I'll write about the Battle Hymn and how the mother shows her control there. Now, there's lots to write about there as well, about the mother forcing her daughters to do things, to play the violin, etc. So there's lots of information that you can find in Battle Hymn with some quotations that support this idea. Now, you could also refer to your shoes. For example, you might want to write about 3 texts that show this idea, or even 4 texts that show this idea. It's really for you to decide. Of course, to find a similarity, you should have 2 texts, but let's assume that there's so much information that you've got. You could write for all 4 of them. Now, let's say you've done that and you find, oh, well, I'm only going to write about 3 texts here. I'm going to find some information for Archangel and your shoes. You could then go on to a new idea. Now, another idea That seems there's a lot of similarity between two kinds, Battle Hymn, Archangel, and Your Shoes, is the idea of the mother appears to be mad or becoming mad. Okay, so that's another idea that you see in these texts, and you could write about that. Now, each of these rows will become your final paragraphs. And then, of course, we'll be having to analyze them and make our comments about it as well. So it's not just enough to identify, find, and name. We're also going to be analyzing, looking deeply at what it means when we write our paragraphs. But I don't need you to do that right now. What I need you to do now is to collect your information. So as you're reading through the text, you're going to be highlighting things that you think might be important. Now, for example, the controlling nature of the mother. The mother appears to be mad or becoming, sorry, that should say mad. You might find another thing. The mother thinks she's doing the best for her child. To protect them. Now that for Archangel is definitely an idea about protection. Also, you could say, well, not necessarily protect them, but take care of them. Ava's doing room. She could talk about that there if she was going to be doing room. Now remember, you do not need to find connections between all the texts, but each text must be used once. Okay. Now, if each of these is going to become a paragraph, then you really don't want more than 3 or 4 connecting ideas. Okay, so at the end of each paragraph, you are going to, or each row, I repeat, each row becomes a paragraph, and after each text you refer to, and at the end of each paragraph, you will do analysis. So we'll talk about analysis more, but that's going to be a really important part of you writing. And analysis is when you look more deeply and you say, what does this mean? What does it tell me about the world? What have I learned from this? Okay, so here are some other ideas that I've put here for the kinds of things that you might want to think about. The mother appears to be mad or becoming mad. Well, if you wanted to do that, you could certainly be doing it for certainly 2 kinds and Your Shoes. Those are really good choices for that. The mother thinks she is doing the best for her child to protect them. Well, you could do that one too. The effect of culture on the way that the mother mothers her daughter, or the effect on the mother-daughter relationship. Well, Chinese parents certainly have a big impact. The why the mothers think they're doing their best. How the mother's background affects the way they are mothers. Now, that's quite a good one, because we know that 2 kinds of mother came from China and she'd had nothing, so she wants everything for her daughter. And we also know that in Your Shoes, that the mother's mother had been very harsh, and so she's just really repeating behavior. So there's a lot you can do with that as well. How the mothers show their love. That's, they all do it in different ways, but sometimes most of them seem to be quite harsh and hard, but in fact they think they're being kind. The negative impact on the daughter, you could look at how the daughter is affected by the mother's behavior, how the relationship changes and becomes stronger, why you sympathize with the mother, and why you sympathize with the daughter. Now, these are just some of the ideas that you could come up with. But remember, you don't want to have more than about 3 or 4 of these main ideas. You may want to try and combine some of them, put them together. For example, the controlling and mad does kind of go together. Wanting the best and protecting can also go together. So think about how you